At 6:47 a.m. on November 3rd, 1944. The war had already devoured more than 50 million lives. Across Europe, entire cities were skeletons dragging dust through their broken ribs. The world had become a machine built to erase faces, and in the grey ruins of Metz, France, that machine was still grinding. The fog that morning promised safety. It lied. Private First Class Michael Donovan, 22, crouched inside what had once been a bakery. Now it was a coffin of stone and smoke. Outside, the streets were silent except for the slow drip of rain through the holes of shattered roofs. Donovan's breath ghosted in the cold air as he checked his rifle, an M1903, Springfield polished to perfection, fed by habit, by fear, by belief. Metz was not a city, it was a fortress. 200 fortified German positions, every street wired for death, every window a mouth waiting to bite. And somewhere out there beyond the grey were the hunters. By early November, the U.S. 5th Infantry Division had lost 23 snipers in this city alone, not infantry charging machine guns, not rookies. 23 of the Army's finest marksmen, men who could split a coin at 200 yards, erased before they even saw the muzzle flash. The hunters had become the hunted. How do you fight an enemy you never see? How do you aim at something that aims first? How do you survive when your skill becomes your weakness? Donovan had been in combat 6 months. He'd seen villages flattened, rivers running black with oil and ash, but Metz was different. Metz breathed back. The fog was its ally, its armor, its lie. Through a jagged crack in the bakery wall, Donovan watched the ruins come alive, with daylight grey light spilling like thin smoke across the stone. Across the street, the Germans were shifting in the haze, faint shapes solidifying into silhouettes. Somewhere inside those ruins, invisible men waited with glass eyes and patient fingers. They were trained to fire once, then vanish. Every 12 seconds, somewhere on the front, a rifle cracked. Every 12 seconds, someone's story ended. Donovan tightened his grip on the rifle. His pulse matched the slow rhythm of distant artillery, thudding like a second heart. He remembered the numbers. He remembered the names. Bradley, Chen, 2 of 23. The math of survival was broken. Every American sniper who set up to hunt was being hunted instead. The Germans had perfected a method, a trap they called Doppelstellung, 2 hidden nests, one to bait, one to kill. Donovan didn't know it yet, but that system would soon face something it couldn't calculate. Outside, the fog began to thin, pulling back like a curtain. The city of Metz appeared in fragments, collapsed spires, burned-out trucks, street signs twisted like bone. In that pale silence, one young soldier waited behind a cracked wall, studying the world through 8 inches of glass. The fog whispered safety. Donovan didn't believe it anymore. And as the first light reached his scope, the story that would rewrite the math of war began. By November of 1944, the war had already consumed more than 60 million lives. Europe was a graveyard built on precision. Cities were dissected, burned, rebuilt, and bombed again. Every minute, 6 soldiers died somewhere along the front. Every minute, another letter began with, "We regret to inform you." Metz was no exception. The old French fortress city had been fortified by both sides since the 1800s. Now, it was a trap made of steel and ghosts. 2 rivers cut through its bones, the Moselle and the Saale, and between them, the Germans had carved 200 concrete positions, 45 anti-tank guns, and 80 miles of interlocking trenches. Each ruin hid a rifle, each shadow held intent, and inside this labyrinth, snipers ruled. Private First Class Michael Donovan knew it better than most. In 6 months of fighting, he had watched entire platoons vanish in seconds. The U.S. 5th Infantry Division had been ground down by invisible fire. 23 American snipers men trained at Fort Benning. The Army's sharpest eyes were erased in Metz before November's first frost. Their loss rate was higher than that of frontline infantry. Donovan's partner, Corporal James Bradley, was the 21st. A quiet kid from Nebraska, steady hands, a shot that could split a nail. On October 18th, a German round cut through the fog and found him first. One sound, one body, one silence. 11 days later, Private Robert Chen joined Donovan in the ruins. San Francisco kid, artist. A man who joked that war was just a bad painting waiting to dry. He lasted 8 days. Donovan remembered the sound, not the rifle crack, but what came after. The choking, the desperate gasps for air. He pressed his hands against Chen's uniform, watching the life drain from him, and realized something every soldier in Metz would come to know. Training couldn't save you from geometry. The problem wasn't bravery, it was math. The Germans had perfected the Doppelstellung, the double position, one shot from point A, then silence from point B. By the time an American sniper found the muzzle flash, the German had already shifted, crawling through a drain, a tunnel, or a street gutter. When the American raised his scope, searching for the first flash, the second barrel was already aimed at his head. 12 seconds. That was the gap, the average time between the first German shot and the American response. 12 seconds was all it took to turn a hunter into a target. In those 12 seconds, everything the Americans were trained to do, observe, locate, return fire, was useless. They were staring through 8 X-scopes, trapped inside narrow cones of vision, blind to their own flanks. The fog wasn't their enemy. Their focus was across Europe. The same story played out. In Normandy, one sniper duel lasted 3 days, both shooters waiting for the other to blink. In the Hurtgen forest, an entire U.S. battalion was pinned down by 5 German marksmen. Each shot delayed the war machine by hours. Snipers weren't just killers, they were economists of terror. One bullet could cost a company a day of movement. One ghost in the window could freeze a bridgehead for a week. Donovan began to feel the weight of that arithmetic. Every time he raised his scope, he imagined another crosshair aimed back at him. He stopped sleeping. He started thinking, calculating angles, mirrors, light. He understood what the officers didn't. The Americans were fighting a doctrine, not men. The Germans had systemized invisibility. When night fell on November 1st, Donovan sat alone, rifle across his lap, staring at the cracked wall that faced east. The fog had settled again, thick and silent. Somewhere beyond it, someone like him was breathing, waiting, watching. That was the war in 1944, not armies clashing, but eyes searching for eyes. And as the candles in the ruined bakery flickered out, Donovan realized something brutal. To survive, he would have to see what couldn't be seen. The thought clung to him like the fog itself. It would follow him into the next night and lead him to the mirror. By the start of November 1944, the war had already devoured 3% of the human race. Across Europe, 70,000 towns had been leveled, 25 million civilians displaced, and the world itself seemed to breathe smoke. Germany still held 1,000 miles of front, and the Allied advance, fed by blood and fuel, was grinding one ruin at a time. In Metz, the fog never left. It drifted through craters and cathedrals, hung on the bones of burned-out tanks. The city had become a geometry of fear angles, distances, and dead men's lines of sight. The American 5th Infantry Division was stalled, losing a sniper every 48 hours. Command blamed discipline. Donovan blamed physics. He hadn't slept in 3 nights. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the same frame. The narrow cone of the scope, the crack of a distant rifle, the instant collapse of someone who was supposed to live. The war had turned into a loop, a 12-second riddle that kept resetting with each sunrise. On the night of November 2nd, the temperature dropped below freezing. Donovan sat in the shell of an old hotel, 3rd floor, a place where the wallpaper still clung in patches, curling like burned leaves. His breath fogged in the air. His hands, steady from habit, began cleaning his kit, not his rifle. It was immaculate, but his personal gear: a shaving bag, a razor, a bar of soap, and a mirror. A simple 4 by 6 inch rectangle, steel-framed, standard army issue. He held it under the flashlight. The reflection was dim, cracked at the corner, but the face staring back was clear enough. 22, grey-eyed, hollow from exhaustion. He looked from the mirror to the rifle, from the rifle to the mirror. Then something clicked, a flash not of light, but of logic. What if vision could bend? The idea sounded absurd, even to him. No regulation manual allowed modification of optical gear. Ordnance rules were strict. Any unauthorized change meant court-martial. But rules had already buried 23 men. Donovan didn't want to be 24. He began. No workshop, no bench, just a broken chair as a table, a knife, electrical tape scavenged from a radio line, and the mirror. His movements were precise, desperate. He measured angles by instinct, too high, and the reflection caught the ceiling, too low, and it blocked the bolt, too far forward, and it distorted the aim. 40 minutes passed. Twice, the mirror slipped and shattered the silence as it hit the floor. Each time, Donovan froze, listening for footsteps, for officers, for anyone who could end this madness before it was born. But no one came. The war outside drowned every sound. Finally, he found it. The perfect position mounted to the left side of the scope, angled at 45 degrees, taped tight until the grip felt solid as bone. From there, when he looked down the sight, the mirror hovered in his peripheral vision, a flicker of light, a second world. His right eye saw forward, his left eye, the flank, a weapon that could finally see behind itself. No workshop, no bench, just a broken chair as a table, a knife, electrical tape scavenged from a radio line, and the mirror. His movements were precise, desperate. He measured angles by instinct. Too high, and the reflection caught the ceiling. Too low, and it blocked the bolt. Too far forward, and it distorted the aim. 40 minutes passed. Twice, the mirror slipped and shattered the silence as it hit the floor. Each time, Donovan froze, listening for footsteps, for officers, for anyone who could end this madness before it was born. But no one came. The war outside drowned every sound. Finally, he found it. The perfect position mounted to the left side of the scope, angled at 45 degrees, taped tight until the grip felt solid as bone. From there, when he looked down the sight, the mirror hovered in his peripheral vision, a flicker of light, a second world. His right eye saw forward, his left eye, the flank, a weapon that could finally see behind itself. He tested it, aiming at a crack on the opposite wall. In the mirror, he saw the door behind him. The effect was crude, distorted but real. He adjusted the tape, tightened the angle, checked the rifle's balance. The added weight was less than 5 ounces. Negligible. The cost of an idea. Outside, the wind dragged dust through the holes in the walls. The city moaned under artillery. Somewhere in the distance, an American battery fired, the shells howling like freight trains. Donovan ignored it all. For the first time in months, his mind was alive. He wasn't surviving, he was solving. He knew what he was doing was illegal. But law had never stood still on a battlefield. What mattered was time. What mattered was the math. In 4 hours, at dawn, he'd be ordered to move to the industrial district, one of Metz's most lethal sectors. 3 sniper teams had gone there. None returned. He glanced again at the mirror, at his reflection caught between steel and shadow. The line between genius and insanity was as thin as tape. And yet, in that cold, cracked room, among the rubble and the rain, a private changed the equation of war. Tomorrow, the fog would lift again. And when it did, Michael Donovan would test the impossible, whether a 10-cent mirror could outsmart death itself. Dawn came grey and heavy. November 3rd, 1944. By that morning, over 405,000 American soldiers had already fallen in World War II. Across the continent, entire generations were being spent one sunrise at a time. Every hill, every street, every ruined city had been bought with human breath. Metz was no different. The siege had entered its 63rd day. U.S. reports estimated 1,600 casualties per mile of advance. Rain turned to ice, and ice turned to fog. The war had slowed into a grinding machine that measured progress not in yards, but in lives. At 6:47 a.m., Donovan crouched once again in the pulverized bakery. The same cracked walls, the same cold air thick with plaster dust and burnt flour. But today, something was different. Taped to the left side of his scope, catching the faint light of dawn, was a small steel mirror, his untested invention, fragile as faith. Beside him was his new partner, Private Sam Martinez, 19, a Texas kid who had never seen combat this close. He carried an M1 Garand and the kind of silence only fear can teach. When he saw the mirror, he asked, "What is that?" Donovan answered, "Survival." The fog clung to the street, wrapping the ruins in silver and silence. The city seemed to be holding its breath. From his position, Donovan had a narrow view of a factory complex 400 yards away, broken windows, twisted girders, the skeleton of industry turned fortress. The Germans were there, waiting. Donovan settled behind his Springfield, the rifle steady against his shoulder. Through the 8X scope, the world shrank to a tunnel. Shades of grey, motionless stone, then movement. Third floor, left window, a flicker, too deliberate for wind. A figure shifting into position. The pattern was familiar. He inhaled once, slow, steady. But then something else. A faint shimmer in the corner of his left eye, a light in the mirror. Across the street, a building he'd dismissed as empty. 1 floor higher, same angle. A glint, a second sniper. Watching him, the same trap that had killed Bradley and Chen reborn. Donovan didn't move, didn't flinch. The air felt electric, stretched thin between 2 triggers. The math of death was ticking down, second by second. He whispered, "German sniper behind us, 3rd floor, left window." Martinez froze. Then he nodded once, quietly raising his Garand. Donovan counted down. 3, 2, 1. The Springfield cracked like a whip. The Garand echoed a half-second later. 2 flashes, 2 impacts, 2 shadows, collapsing back into rubble. Then silence. Donovan's shoulder ached from the recoil. He ejected the spent casing. The brass hit the floor, ringing like a bell. Through the scope, the factory window was empty. In the mirror, the opposite building was still. They were alive. For the next 4 hours, they fought from that bakery, methodical, surgical. Each time Donovan fixed on a target, the mirror caught a flicker, a movement, a threat on the flank, and each time Martinez fired first. 6 confirmed kills before noon. 0 losses. The numbers told the story the impossible had become routine. By dusk, word spread across the division. Donovan's mirror rifle had saved an entire team. Sergeant Frank Wilson, a veteran from Montana, came to see it himself. He'd lost 2 partners in 3 weeks. When he peered through Donovan's scope, saw the mirror's reflection, he whispered, "We should have had this months ago." That night, Donovan helped Wilson tape a mirror onto his own rifle. Then another sniper, and another. By midnight, 4 teams had the modification. It spread faster than orders could. Soldiers scavenged glass from vehicles, from helmets, even from the remains of German optics. Within a week, 9 rifles in the 5th Division carried mirrors, and the math began to change. In October, the Americans had lost 2 snipers for every German killed. By mid-November, the ratio flipped, 4 German snipers eliminated for every American lost. The fog was no longer lying, it was working for them now. Across Metz, the unseen duel of shadows began to tilt. German reports logged unusual counterfire accuracy. Snipers were being shot before they could relocate, ambushed by Americans who shouldn't have been able to see them. The hunters were back. Donovan, for the first time in months, slept that night. The city still burned, the guns still thundered, but something had shifted. One man, one mirror, had bent the rules of war. He didn't know that command would soon find out. He didn't know the mirror would turn into both a revolution and a crime. But for now, as the moonlight caught the dull edge of steel on his rifle, Michael Donovan believed what no soldier dared to believe in Metz, that tomorrow might not kill him, and that belief, fragile as glass, would carry him straight into history. By mid-November 1944, Europe was running out of men. The Allies had crossed France at a cost of more than 600,000 casualties, and the German army, though retreating, still fought with the precision of desperation. Entire villages were gone, the land scarred by 1.5 million tons of artillery. The air itself smelled of carbon and iron. But inside the ruins of Metz, something unexpected had happened. For the first time in months, the numbers were turning. The hunters were no longer dying first. Captain Robert Hayes, commander of the 5th Infantry Division Sniper Platoon, was a man of regulations, 12 years of service, spine straight as a rifle barrel. On November 10th, he climbed the stairs of a bombed-out church tower to inspect Donovan's position. He expected order. He found rebellion taped to a rifle. The mirror glinted in the thin light, a crude rectangle of steel and adhesive, a child's invention in a war of machines. Hayes stared at it for a long, silent 10 seconds. Then, the question, "What is that, Private?" Donovan didn't answer, his throat locked. Court-martial, reassignment, the end. But Martinez, standing beside him, spoke first. Calm, steady. "It's a mirror, sir, a modification. It lets us see what's behind us. It's saved lives." Hayes didn't speak. He stepped forward, crouched beside the rifle, and looked through the scope. He glanced at the mirror, saw the reflection of the hallway behind him, and understood everything. When he stood up, his voice was quiet. "How many rifles have this modification?" Donovan swallowed. Hayes paused, eyes on the fog curling through the broken stained glass. Then he said words that rewrote the chain of command. "By tomorrow morning, I want every rifle in this battalion to have one. That's an order." He didn't salute, he didn't smile. He just turned and walked back down the stairs. That night, Donovan didn't sleep. He worked. The snipers gathered in the basement of a ruined hotel, surrounded by broken furniture and flickering lanterns. Mirrors scavenged from wrecked trucks, belt buckles, signal glass, anything that reflected light. They taped, wired, and strapped them to scopes. Wilson, Martinez, every man who had survived Metz, joined in. They worked until dawn, not soldiers anymore, engineers of survival. By November 12th, every sniper in the 5th Infantry carried a mirror. By November 14th, the effect was undeniable. Reports from the front read like science fiction. German snipers were being shot before their second positions were used. Entire ambushes collapsed in seconds. The Americans' kill ratio jumped to 4-1, then 6-1. The Germans called it the Phantom Eye. They believed the Americans had developed a new optical technology. They hadn't. They'd developed an idea. The fog of Metz, once a death shroud, now became cover for the hunters again. German tactics failed in real time. The mirror turned the battlefield inside out. For Donovan, it was vindication, but not triumph. He'd seen too many friends fall to believe in glory. When soldiers congratulated him, he only said, "It wasn't me, it was the math finally working right." By December, the mirror spread beyond Metz. Field reports from Nancy, Saarlautern, even Luxembourg mentioned unofficial optical modifications. Donovan's name never appeared. The army bureaucracy stamped them as field improvisations, temporary use only. Then came the audit. In January 1945, inspectors from Aberdeen Proving Ground arrived to investigate the unauthorized devices. 3 officers, 2 civilian engineers, crisp uniforms and colder hearts. They tested the rifles. They took notes. They called it a minor but measurable improvement in situational awareness. He fought until the war's end, May 8th, 1945. 11 months in combat. 47 confirmed kills. 6 times, the mirror saved his life. When the guns went silent, Donovan went home to Pennsylvania. No medals, no interviews. He worked in a factory, married in 1947, had 3 children, never spoke of the mirror. By the 1960 seconds, the modification was forgotten. New scopes, new wars. The old designs were filed away. History has a way of erasing the hands that hold it steady, but time leaves traces. In 1987, a military historian researching sniper tactics found a maintenance log from Metz mentioning improvised mirrors and a Private M. Donovan. One of them was Sam Martinez, now a retired police officer in Texas. Martinez told him everything. He described the nights in the ruined hotel, the 6-hour battle in the bakery, the first reflection that changed everything. He said the mirror saved 50 lives, maybe more. The historian found Donovan that same year, 67 years old, quiet, still in Pennsylvania. When asked if the story was true, he simply said, yes. When told that his mirror had likely saved dozens of snipers, Donovan paused, then whispered, I never counted. I just remember who came home. He passed away on June 7, 2001, age 79. His obituary mentioned service in World War II, nothing more. At his funeral, 4 old men arrived unannounced. They were snipers, men who had survived because of the mirror. They drove hundreds of miles to stand at his grave. One of them, Wilson, placed a small rectangle of glass on the casket. We kept seeing because of you, he said. Today, if you walk through the Infantry Museum at Fort Benning, you'll find a World War II Springfield rifle displayed under glass. On its scope, a small mirror remains held in place by crude, ancient tape. The label reads, Field Modification, late 1944, origin unknown. But that mirror is not unknown. It is Michael Donovan's legacy, small, simple, and indestructible. In a war that consumed millions, he didn't invent a weapon, he invented a way to survive. And maybe that's the truest kind of victory. Not the kind written in medals or reports, but the kind reflected in glass, the kind that saves a life and keeps shining long after the fog is gone.